who found. The second concern is how the money will be spent, particular very low income housing, which is great, but then it mentions work usually used in place. If we mean middle income housing, force people to and the income level. But I hope you can take those. Thank you.
Thank you. Followed by Peter Cherneff.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Actually, I learned long ago, yes, you should say as a little thank you for the lead. I think it was December, bank officials that had come here, communities, and Amy Fishman, which is executive director, and he was determined in December, and we looked at him and said, absolutely determined, and I could tell you here today, without a ton of credit for getting, you know, I've said this before, and now of 12,000 people, 12,000 people is because we cut it off, so waiting list of over 20,000. So this money is a statement. It is more, we have this one rare opportunity, and I'm going to be able to move this forward. Where this money completing a project right is exactly the project of the city, and we have
court hearing in Santa Rosa making available transition that are on the street turned down, truly considered it would, which is no surprise, operating under a program, or the several people on the can't seem to comprehend the fault of all of us. To speak like everyone else would be to things are normal and the corruptive situation from that aspect. But there is an end, and we're not embracing, we've shared many times, the power by being involved. They enjoy ruling in vampire of camp that are sitting in Sonoma. Millions do Sonoma County on tens of thousands of Africa.
Project. It's really an element from 2001 that the county of Sonoma, there was a for people. And the thing about we have to make sure 72 on 4 acres over could be replicated elsewhere. Gentlemen from Burbank Housing, those are key words. Is most of the, especially for low income folks. And right now, the railroad of put up here a booklet from 10 years, read the community, so it's a group, because they were going to housing to be, is where they'll be. They're set up for the burden, but I would have lower income people. That's what will make, and we're going forward on our general. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's all the cards I have. Sorry. Thank you. Staff have
this week with over 400 throughout California, Burton City Sheriff's Office, Harbor counties, and experiences of this past from the Cal Transportation. It is awarded to Transit all of duty to assist older. This year, bus operations team center dispatchers went into action quickly that were fully ablaze to events. They are Steve Rojas, while reported to knowing his own home was direct. These dedicated professional visibilities and roadways ready, relying on radio to navigate out of the fire to get 200 vulnerable people away. They went about community to prevent further loss of life. This has also been nominated to Transit for a additionally awarded 1 bus will add 2 battery. The new buses will improve the transit system as well, was one of only 12 in the Bay Area.
Those are both really happy to hear that the operators are the fires. A lot of that those folks became first. I've seen from the buses, drivers on the call of duty to, and they risk their own lives. Attorney's report.
I have no.
And who would?
No, I was going to reply.
That's fine.
Friday, I attended the On the Road shows that was coming back on the last as a community, but they're representing the city.
Remembered that one because it wasn't this end. Two things. April 5th, downtown subcommittee, well-attended meeting with and update on how some encouraging as specific plan to build additional new housing downtown. This Thursday, city, county, and interesting meeting talking about to pursue to maximize downtown. There'll be more news on that. Sorry, Mr.
Are actually not funding already approved. The city is such a helpful glib approach to already made forward and says, now you got to pay us a lot of money to get our money to appeal. This is our planning for the future now is a bit of disaster capitalism, saying, oh, well, we're just going to have to get back to you in a few years. It's not going to be good because in a few got our spots here, these temporary will just now be grandfathered. So later being used, as you go see that there needs to the public can be there, fight of what's going to happen. Important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Separate 11, consistent with my vote.
A question on 11.2 now and then go to it. So I will move to the consent calendar and waive.
Your votes on 1, 7 ayes.
Could, for just a quick question, have time. We passed the temporary, extended the 3-year associated.
What we life of the temporary use permit structures and others to being following the date of approval.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Proceed.
I will move and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
To public comment on. Thank you. We'll start with Mr. Church and Gloria Eurotas.
Quite some time ago, got in trouble in the gym. Truth is straight. No doubt, truth has patience. Truth are touching. The voice of truth is simple. The soul of form, the firm through rain or storm. Truth stands above all in life. Truth is Christ, God. Son of truth is God. Life of truth is eternal. It's called rocking the fire of spirit desire. Mighty, so to the and Aphrodite, I spirit warriors to engage. Come semper fi. So our spirit. Have you experienced pain? Have you had pain? Truly, truly, answer truly. What strike being the animals, one and all. To be the cure, we must be royal.
Kersey, members of the council, Siamese myself, the formal appeal on Monday, final design review approval, assisted living and memory area.
Well, because we believe strongly not have approved the project. Described in detail in the city council carefully. We feel comfortable with us that this, a number of community members, and the article was in the press, thanks and support, and one solicitor. So while we're the ones who have a lot of people behind us and who feel as strongly as we do, should be denied.
Thank you. Steve.
Hello. Hi. Issue that should be on the fires, but emergency letters is Mary's. It's called the asking me questions about all the people put in past. I said, oh, they were still neglected. Actually, you even occupy for what you've reached. Julie Combs one time, I'm going to believe, and thank God everybody throw out some bathroom. And there's probably 100 to 150 and all that. Homeless person with homeless, they're the first. Church, give them a place to go to the bathroom. My God, Sonoma County was just, you guys haven't popped 150, but I got churches that spent for the, and we're going to get some disrespect and they're getting census. Who's getting, and somebody's talking false. You want to be judged by God, bathroom, and even have their, like, what kind of spirit wars is of misappropriating this money? You got, all you guys get to go away, get some phones once about homeless. So we'll get back with you next. No, actually here, how much did you spend? Right out here you have coves or homeless to expense. I was told that 1.8 million, 110,000 for this, 100, I pay for one.
Thank you, Mr.
37 years ago. But the reason I bring it is because there's things in there that we could follow up on now. We can make positive things happen. The screen will come back up, which is about, and that long ago, people in Roseland were working with the county greenway along Roseland Creek. 2 small neighborhood parks over here by the freeway in all of southwest Santa Rosa at that time. Now there's easily forward your jurisdictional bureaucracy. Transportation, they're redoing right master plan. And yet, people on how to get along Roseland Creek had already purchased. That bikeway could happens with other property. Where the silos do to each other that makes for places with highest rate of childhood heart problems for the elderly. How to create and implement. You're going to have a general plan update in the future. This is how you could start, and you could get other people's money, if you will. That's what drives most people's money, them trying. So I'm asked, already talked about, and help us with our page. You can, well, I was going to show you that it says.
Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, sir.
Richard Hammer.
My name is Katya Mill. I'd like to thank the council to speak out against 4G and 5G. I was hoping that Sonoma would follow Governor Jerry when he vetoed the small 649 last application from going out in our neighborhood. Why is Verizon towers that ugly? And Paul McGavin, who has spoken with videos, there is no cell coverage in our, they're not needed. Shannon, founder of Hillsborough, his address to their city, Crown Castle's powers, protect our city from becoming those to die and do the right thing. Devastating fires, we've time to install as the community high speed, high bandwidth to every business to what the city of San fiber optic network, which is much safe for humans in these, and only a fraction by wireless networks. Ray, who's a medicine doctor, said electromagnetic radiation health, it is impairs, governments are about it. The human, please, especially the next generation, microwave radiation from
Richard.
Town planning departments that allow LP. It is John Jankel and silence and evil once and for all. Justice in violation of Penal Code 5 and Committee 37. You should carry under the United States, of course, Sonoma County Supervisor Shirley the dirt disturbing 9/11. Okay, 887 Bush Creek, 874,880 planned murders during the Enron builder Ken Lay plan by author of the United States as he determines age and concealing on 9/11. So, California Public Service organized crime for Willie Brown, Stain County, is a breakdown of law and order in about 9/11. And now our county of Sonoma office and contracts with others is world class by supporting and defending you violate and commit treason. In 2002, one corruption department gave to Paul Hobbs Winery, El Giordano, prevents violations of California Penal 28 of the counties of 9/11. The Wizard of Deception, Willie Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. Followed by Scott Wagner.
2, appointed Sonoma County, our staff dismissed 32-page public notice as a bait site plan for commercial access. They want 3, we, the 9/11, the original site plan for use on page 5, supporting evidence in Salon land zone 4 only, has been fraudulently altered site plan. Pages of some 40 pages of use of agricultural is hard evidence of fraud. County of Sonoma document. He, she, or they destroyed evidence, site plan, end quote. Use permit, UPE 0 of weed that betrayed people's County of Sonoma. UP 1,000 square foot, 1 building. Evidenced on page 2 on of land zoned for trees to remain at Jankel. At the time, protected by grand intimidators, been fighting corruption, tree and this nation and years. It's an incredible feat. A second time, or
Scott Wagner.
Thank you for your time. To just provide a little what home nations are doing down at the right now. We're a county to be able to be committed. The judge, everyone, I think is the legal disabilities and need that. I've been there working on the disabled, really shocking. Talk with them. I have just time after time systematically say that they give very specific them on any alternative plans, anything. I'm just trying to help the county with that matter. Judge, you know, when I wrote my parts really hard on it, there's a whole John Lowry there and put our heads together to figure out a responsible village. I don't pretend to know that stuff, expert in homelessness. Pretty complicated and certainly more than I want homelessness than I do overall. Maybe he's done a thing on the agenda about this or whatever it is.
Go follow.
I used to come here, but now I run for Mr. Essa Conceal, next door to me. The organized crime, I have a copy to Mr. Oliveira. I met Democrats about, and I haven't seen in a long time. Look through my phone.
In that considered range in Bear Cut, located at the Y at that point that brings the rail over to, and it used to be there, lived on Neil Drive. You could hear it at night. So the station, that's why that was considered, the station is for an interurban depot, and it would have interfered to those two stations so that the draw doesn't actually. So here's, this has to do with Roseland. And the order said that sheltering warehouse-like environment with copper floor would likely be unconstitutional. But the evidence that's provided by the government indicates this is not the case. Far worse. If you rooms that Sam Jones contained using bunk beds, twice that of mere cots, the human population density cots on the floor, disabled people many times been required to stabilize the top bunks onto their consciousness, in which no one's in that unconsciousness somebody on the floor and thinking they're onto their head. Their Eighth Amendment. So when but in fact, it said the judge's order it so far. When it's shown, there will be.
Thank you. Concludes our public comment period on a 1-minute break so we can set up for our public hearing / district elections conversation at 6 o'clock. back to order. Hopefully we've taken care of item 14.1.
Public hearing. District continued consideration of draft ordinance adopted.
I'm going to give a brief review of what we're going to be doing. Johnson will help us remain in the process. Potential map modification to the discussion. Of course, last initiate a process to transition the city from at-large election of city council members to election of council members by district. And we're, of course, quite well on our way in that transition. We're at the 5th in on and what criteria should be used. Hearing after this evening. So for this evening, to ensure that our transition is to implement number 2018 election, and that the council this evening select the final map of voting districts and determine a sequence of voting, that is which districts would vote in 2018 and which will vote in 2020, and then that the council introduce an ordinance in accordance with your decisions. As I said, we've had 6 public hearings. 2 were in February prior to the drafting of any maps. We are, of course, on the 3rd of those 3 hearings. And then the final hearing is scheduled for next week. We've talked a lot already before about the requirements for districting. So the issues again, we've gone through this. This is not new. But by state and federal law, each council district must contain a nearly equal population. The district and the Federal Voting Rights Acts be the predominant factor. By our city charter, the council will continue to consist of 7 council members. Each council member will continue to be elected for a 4-year term, and elections will continue to be staggered, and the mayor will continue to be selected by a vote of the council members. We have the optional factors to consider: communities of interest, a respect for other jurisdictional boundaries, keeping districts compact and contiguous, using natural and public facilities in each district. And leading up to this evening, you've also talked about how best to incorporate the newly annexed communities and how best to address the downtown area. Oops, let me back up. So this all has to do with how the districts are drawn and the mapping process. We are down at this point to 3 potential maps. We have the map 121B, which is the map that you selected last week as the final map to move forward. We have received 2 maps that were submitted after the deadline for consideration at last week's meeting, so we will be looking at those 2 maps as well.
Can I stop you for just a minute there,
Sure.
Ms. Gallagher? Those 2 maps, 3 and 1, were submitted after the deadline. For the we have received no more.
So we followed last week. So you would look at those 2 maps, 2 new maps first, and that you consider them each on its own, vote up or down on each of those 2 maps as to whether the map should move forward or not. If you decide that either or both of those maps should have further consideration, then we would group whichever map or maps you choose, group that with the 121B, and then have the council vote amongst those 2 or 3 maps to select the final map. I do want to mention that since we are at a point, the ordinance, you the code to make a map. If you have to preserve, of course, applications or whatever map is, whether it is 1B, 131, or if any of those are, it is public next week's meeting if you choose next week. Map in place, then we'll be, as we've mentioned, 3 districts will vote in 2018, 4 districts will vote in 2020. The factors that you may wish to consider, the benefits of early representation on the council, so that some you may desire that some districts have representation as soon as possible. You may want to consider the benefits of the higher voter turnout in presidential election years. So if a district has a history of low voter turnout, you may vote in 2020. Or you want to weigh in on existing council members and whether they might be reelected or not. And I think Mr. Johnson will go into that in a little more detail. So our next steps, again, this evening, we recommend that you select a final map and that you determine the election sequence and that you introduce an ordinance to implement district-based elections for the city of Santa Rosa. We will then have a final public hearing next Tuesday. Again, it's scheduled for 5 o'clock. And at that point, you will, after the public hearing and after any further discussion and consideration, you will be in a position to adopt a final ordinance. And I will now hand it over to Mr. Johnson.
Starts, I just want to see if there are any presentation.
Okay, there we go. You remember from the last discussion, we came down to 121B. And just as a quick spin around for comparison to the Eastern District. In some of the other maps you've looked at before, half its population east of the freeway. In downtown, 1, 2, 4, and 7 all pick up. It has more, instead of one district picking up all of the east, it really has 2 districts going off to the east side of town. We have the vertical 1 and 2 in the south, but instead of a 3rd district vertically stacked in the west, it has what the writer said was an intentionally diverse District 6, and half its population from south, stack a big central north district.
You may do it at this stage rather than later. Minor modifications to one of your preferred map modifications. Council, and up to the order you do that, you can do it either way.
In the interest of full in tweaking map, and I believe they've talked to the on notice that one like that's flawed in that it 3/4 of the Roseland annexation, and by western boundary west from Burbank Avenue to Stony Point Road, it would take in the entire Roseland annexation into that district. And I believe the population balance could be achieved by bringing District 7 southeast of Fern and Stony Point.
And just to confirm, we did look at that because you mentioned you would be interested in discussing it. Balance out. We would just move down to Hearn, essentially. If we want to go show you on the map exactly how far that would need to go.
Give the rest of the council a heads up. My thoughts. So, any at this point?
So possibly with a map, the configure that map, looking at how possible it would be line from Summerfield Road so that the area east of Summerfield Road would be included in District 3, since that district shares bordering on that with the district on the other side of the park, east of Calistoga Road, 3 into District.
And I also, just a really small, south of the park between Districts 2 and 3, at least as you zoom in across a neighborhood, and I just want that cleaned up, Trail Drive.
Yes.
In a way that pulls those folks into the same district as opposed to playing hopscotch with it.
Okay.
Other questions or comments on this? Your presentation?
Back. We have a little bit more on sequencing.
So this is a public hearing, and choosing a map, and then as you address the council, please include comments if you have opinions on. Open the public hearing. He'll be.
Roseland for decades. Representation for Roseland filed the suit. Although you go, oh, that looks pretty good. It's right up there in the downtown district. And you can bet money and politics and supervisors, because money and the election, the way our system works, and I don't get it up. We just need, there's a 3 in the downtown area. Vote over here. But you can't organize across vote. There, besides Mr. Oliver, well, he may be sheriff. Population up almost to 40, and we'll go with that.
James Duncan.
I'm James Duncan. So, of the map 121, it is already provides one and proof on map 123 is very cross 107. Are
anyone else who wants to address?
Ann Edwards, I live in Santa Rosa. I too agree that interesting map to me, because since we're looking at benefit for the city, we should use in president and other similar presidential use, long-term, more vested.
The council, seeing no one rise, I'll close the. Mr. Johnson, the power districts, a conversation in maps, citizen voting age of the various districts as using that. Seems to me that of the 21B, the most, those being and 7, that 25% as we would be able to find
the other maps
numbers even. And just to have campaigned in some time or another, and for city council could probably find to campaign. Council, are there any vote first decision which would be good 31 and 133?
We'll take each of those as we definitely add so that the all motion. Member Schwedhelm.
No.
Councilmember Tibbetts.
No.
Vice Mayor Corsi.
No.
Move forward for any from map 133, a roll call vote, and the question forward for further consideration.
And bear with me, continues to flicker. Councilmember Combs?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Oliveras?
No.
No.
Councilmember Schreiber Tibbetts?
No.
Mayor, map number 133, 121 is the conversation to entertain any.
I'll go back to start this and if tweaks.
I thought you started it.
I think Mr. Johnson is.
Is there Field Road? This, in fact, Rogers concerns also. Field Road can go with these. I don't know how many people that pulls in.
Sure. Quickly looked. Just the small change here. If we don't do the larger number of people, so we can do that change. Okay. If we're putting B, it gets.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, because
it does get odd at the bottom because there's a municipal golf course there.
Yeah. So it's not quite. The census blocks don't continue down, so we jog over a little bit. But here we're looking at just under 1,500 people. So it'd be 1,496 going from one to the other. And as you were anticipating, that would take our difference between our smallest and largest over 10%, so we would have to balance that.
Which I was hoping we would do with the north. And again, I'm not sure if we can put some of that.
Yes, so let me see. Yeah. Well, it depends on how we do it. So
I don't know, Arthur.
Yeah, if we're looking to just starting at the top here. That is 2,000 people. So it's actually, that little piece we're looking at now is already more than we're looking at in the other switch and would put us.
Does that mess up District 4 too much?
It does here. 7%. And yeah, and District 1 is short by 3.72. So we're a little over 10%. We have to walk it back a little.
What if you went to Baird?
If
you just
that part, yeah.
Not with Fountain Grove. Roseland Hole.
Mayor's concerns, I would like to back out a little bit.
Yeah, actually gets us below the target population. 3 is the largest at 4, so it's a high deviation, but
I understand that there are who's on what side of.
Yeah.
Any other comments on Rogers? Do you want to? Oh, you're concerned.
What's our process for it?
Mayor, we take each change, Roseland change, and vote as, then we can take vice mayor, then we can take the northeast chat. So we could take each.
Take the southern other change with it, or you really have to move together.
Yeah.
I'm willing to consider. I'm not seeing the.
So what I'm going to say, because we made one and then making a change on the other side, do we want to take a...
Thank you. And it had to do about Rincon Valley, and I'm not looking, does that indeed split off of that Rincon Valley and put it into Fountain Grove?
Can you zoom in on those streets there?
I'm trying to figure out how Rincon Valley that is versus how northern.
It pulls the middle school in before. Trying to not make a mess out of, with the intention of doing good, doing bad.
Is that the right-hand corner of the green portion?
Exactly. So the area we're talking about is above Montecito over to Baird, and it's really the 2 blocks on each side of the Rincon Valley Middle School and the school.
And can you go down a little farther to the south?
Sorry, to the...
Okay. Yeah, that's...
Can you magnify that just a little bit more for us?
Yeah, that keeps in the apartment area, the apartment buildings along Montecito, keeps it in the...
Really awkward triangle that pokes out and grabs literally one house on that corner.
That a little farther north?
Yeah, right there, that triangle that pops out there. And I know that the census tracts makes it a little bit difficult to get these lines perfectly clean, but I'd hate for, we hear all the time about somebody right across the street is in a different district. This one literally, on both sides of them, their neighbor will be in a different district from them.
Well, part of it is, as you say, is the census geography looks funny.
You're right. Never mind.
Yeah. When this is officially the city line, which is the dash line, it's just an odd.
Where we put the lines, people are going to be to the streets. Right. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, a concern you had, it was a demographer made.
Well, the proposal goes the field road and park a drafting error in the line, folks, right here.
Oh, so you're Park Trail in District 2?
I was saying have that line follow Park Trail as opposed to cutting across, zigzagging across that neighborhood.
District 4, a little bit east into District 3.
And that does not make District 2 too small, removing those 1,500 on this suggestion.
Clarification on the shift up, or does that the middle school into what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I believe it.
Yes, yeah. So sorry, the school was one trying to get the live map. Yeah, so the school is right here in this Cone Road and Estes Drive. So when we switch, so they're not live connected.
Yeah, it's called Rincon Valley Middle School. So what happens if that goes back into District 3?
Then 3 becomes overpopulated. We have to move something else out.
Yes, Mr. Tibbetts.
One thing that I was going to say about, later middle school, Montgomery, hard up against the park of we need to choose. Ms. Combs, I'm not sure prompted the change to share more on those, but I'm kind of Vice Mayor Rogers, consistent along Park Trail, but schools in the respective Valley District.
May I answer that?
Yes.
My understanding, the schools in Summerfield, not even an area that is actually more like Fountain Grove, are living in, and so more, and they are who are in Montgomery Village with here. Keeping the middle school, and I'm open to suggestions. My goal is that the people have a lot of interest with the park and a lot more in common. Folks on the other side of the park graphically are a different population.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was going to, by that logic, found that we had multiple districts to have more than one district.
When I look at the feel that Combs' suggestion, I suggest that the people are south of don't feel highly. I just go ahead and changes because I'm not seeing that, and just to go with the small changes.
I appreciate that and appreciate other factors graphic include. I can also, why don't we just move it?
Ready to vote on Ms. Combs?
Okay, so are we back at the middle school district?
That. Ready to vote, Council? Williams, please call the roll.
So, Coyer?
No.
Councilmember Tibbetts? Vice Mayor Rogers?
No.
Mayor Corsi?
Line along Park as the difference between, and actually just as a break, one district versus the other, technical drafting thing.
Okay.
Exactly along the same line, but then I don't think you can see the parcel as well in that.
It's like
view.
one home.
It's at the end of headed left.
Not even sure.
District.
Yeah. So.
Big an elected official.
Yeah, so these two census, that's 67 people. And then people, would you?
It looks like folks off of Cottsberry Court, Park Trail Drive there, then and puts it in the other one. There's no way.
We have enough play in the population numbers. What we'll have to do is, which I can't do, work it into the ordinance language, because you're right, it's.
I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to see, that picture doesn't.
Right.
All right, I think we're ready to vote on Ms. Gomez.
So,
before I get to show districts 1, overlay the Roselawn into that.
Let me add that later on. Describe first. So the area here is the main.
The Stony Point.
Extended across Stony Point.
Right.
But rather, if we followed that, then we'd end up with this house in, this house out, this house in, this house out.
How many people are we talking? Just out of curiosity.
That are in that move. Let me see.
That would then be on the other side of
Stony Point.
Yeah. Oh, I see. 193.
In terms, is that 1 and 7?
They were 5 and 25, and those three 27 and 25. It's rounding differences, and 20 is still 25.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and just Burbank doesn't go all the way through.
Sure. I think it's a.
Meadow is farther west.
Where is that?
Yeah, actually, you'd be.
Is there a way to?
It's in a really big block. So the
Do we have an, if I may, do we have an overlay of the Bellevue school districts?
School district bound.
The school district for the Bellevue Cross 101, just trying to see who's in and who.
Yeah, let me see.
And if you could, because I know RUP would still.
Mr. Sawyer,
Wondering what we're trying to clean that.
so when you're saying if that's in the Greek, is there any, was it 106 still in the annexation of Stony Point?
Them, I think we're still okay. Is that really a question of versus?
Okay. So vote on this if there's an appetite for. And I just wonder what this is, what we're voting.
Okay, Councilmember Combs, Councilmember Oliveras,
Yes.
Councilmember Schwartz-Tibbetts,
Yes.
Mayor Coursey.
Yes. All right. And the Roseland annexation.
My apologies, which one was this again?
This is
Bring that little wedge, bringing that in so that's where the rest of the Roseland.
Councilmember Sawyer, Councilmember Schwartz,
No.
Mayor Coursey.
All right. Are there any changes on map? We've got a map. Well, you want to talk for sequence?
The map you just adopted tonight. We're going to start off with we've prepared.
This is really what we talked about back at the so, and there need to be 3 in 2018 and 4 in 2020 because that's the current cycle, and anything else would change the number of people sitting at your table. There is language about giving special consideration to the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act. It's nothing specific. It was actually written before the 2016 election. So there are 2 ways to give special consideration that we talked about. The other is when we're talking about underrepresented areas, we're usually talking about low turnout areas. As one of the public commenters mentioned, sometimes it's a benefit to have low turnout areas up in presidential years. So it meant right away, 2016. Now we're 2 years later, and right away means 2018, a gubernatorial year. Helping turnout would be 2020, a presidential year. So you're okay in terms of the spirit of law, I think, either way. And the reason for the turnout issue is, as we've talked about, for example, in District 1, Latinos are 28% of the eligible voters and a relatively lower turnout than the rest of the voters in that area. So if their ability to influence the choice of who represents that area is enhanced when more of them are likely to turn out, which would be a presidential year.
If I may interrupt you, numbers would be since on 1 and 7. Thank you.
Yeah, refers to you of the raw data. Oops. So when we get to 24, in 2014 there were 97, essentially 2,600. And then if I scroll over to 2017, now these are estimates. In the presidential votes in District 1, if I go back to 2014, 640, 640. 2020, bring it up as soon as possible. There's no
clarify that same numbers.
So 2020, 200 votes.
Maybe.
I'm sorry. No, in 2014, were Latino. 2016, had 9,000, whom 2,040. 20 and have 1 in each city.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. District 3 to vote a lot. Chance they get.
3 in 2016, the 15,600. In 2014 was yes, in 500, very small number, 160. So that piece, this decision essentially is members in these districts who are on those cycles, and the districts will reflect their cycles. So definitely understand and endorse the idea of representation as soon as possible, but that's a one-time benefit. The high turnout year is a benefit forever. The other piece of this, the council's been very clear about not addressing the issue of where council members live in any of these maps, but in terms of sequencing, now is when it really is inevitable and certainly makes sense, especially from the voters' perspective, to look at this. So what happens is if a council member's election current term ends in 2018 and they're in a 2018 district, no problem. You just run at the end of this term, you just run from the district instead of at large. Same thing with 2020. If a council member's current term ends in 2020 and they're in a 2020 district, they just run by district for their next term. Where it gets complicated is if a council member's in the other year. So if a council member's term ends in 2018, is in a seat that's up in 2020, at the end of the current term, that council member leaves the council. There's no vote, there's no voters getting to weigh in. A council member leaves the council, could then run in 2020, 2 years down the road, as not as an incumbent, but could run for the seat after 2 years off the council. If a council member's term ends in 2020 and they end up in a 2018 seat, is to finish the current term and then leave the council. There's once passing. I actually think it'll happen in a couple. The 2020 in 2018 cleared it with council and worked with like 4-year term, and they resign, and the council then has a 2-year election, remaining 2 years of their. Again, it's very rare. It's not up till 22. I have no one on the council. Current remain at large until 2020. So 3 districts were elected in 2018. The people who reside in the other 4 districts are represented by the 4 at-large council members who stay on the council. So, they're still represented by them. If there was a vacancy, they could be appointed to fill that vacancy. If they were to get upset, they could mount a recall against one or more of those 4 at-large council members. They're still represented by the at-large council members. You're never without a representative on the council. In terms of decision-making, we have, as you've done, decisions aren't made until a map's chosen, because you can imagine going through all these scenarios for 15 maps. It gets to be a nightmare and doesn't matter for 14 of them. Typically, if a district ends up that there's only 1 council member in it, that district's assigned to that year. And the idea that it sounds incumbent friendly, it's really for the voters. We're telling the voters, you get to decide whether this council member has earned another term. They still have to run by district. They're not, but it does let multiple council members who have to choose as then the other maybe lean towards where the 2 are. The 2020 council member could write the answer to this, as I think I actually had an independent commission to recommend against it, which is 2 and the lot. So the voters didn't get decided, they were out. So that's answer any questions, or that they're voting.
Council. Said at the beginning of the public hearing, the request sequencing during the public hearing much, and given in a previous public hearing. Mr. Tato.
To select 3 districts, 3 and 4 for the put together fodder in terms of the election. We also have option 6, which is open if there are other suggestions from the dais that in terms of an option or a process you would like to consider. So the first option would be a straight elimination voting. So you have the 7 districts, and you would start by with 4 votes, and our goal will be to get to 3 districts that will go in 2018. And if we don't have a majority or any one of them get 4 votes, we'll keep doing the cycles of 4, 3, 2 votes till we get 3 districts selected for 2018. So that's option 1. We titled it Option 2, discuss each and consider each district independently. So discuss District 1 and then vote, do you want that in 2018 or 2020? If more than 3 are identified for 2018, then we would do a runoff of those that were initially identified for 2018. Option 3 is what we call the incumbency consideration, and Mr. Johnson talked about some options here. So we could look at the districts where there is only one current representative right now in that district, and their term expires in 2018. If you select that, and we have 2 currently in that situation, then for the 3rd district, you would vote from the remaining districts. Option B is we have 3 incumbents whose terms expire in 2018, and so you could just select those 3 districts to be the districts voting in 2018. Option 4 is the random selection. We put all 7 numbers in a hat and we draw at 3. Option 5, we're calling the annexation consideration. So there's a couple questions to answer here. The first is, should the newly annexed area vote for a district representative in 2018? And we would ask you to vote yes or no on that. If you voted yes, then the question would be for the remaining 2 districts, should those come from one from the east side of the 101 or from the west side of the 101. And what we will do for that is we will divide those into 2 hats and we will draw one from each. If the answer is no, you do not want to consider the newly annexed area independently or for 2018, then we would choose one of the other options to make the selection. And then option 6, this is if there is another process or method that the can go through, then discussion and consideration.
Thank you. Questions about the project or any other option? Ms. Combs.
Of course. 5, to perhaps it's becoming an option, might apply to multiple interested in the presidential, and I'm trying to figure out how, and if it's possible to have a whole free, and you might have the
question
district. One of the ways to make gubernatorial is to make that B is clear for using the 3rd district. 5. Yes, and then opposite sides, but you could say presidential turnout data that's missing there, or you could simply look at it, have high turnout.
Where are you going with it, Ms.? What if we made using as part of?
I would still, if option 5, that discussion as part of the.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
It's Chris. I don't know how to delicately putting people, but I see in the argument whether or not somebody, part of the consideration is the work that they have by having again, and they have no, we have not opened up to manifest it. So we don't have a remedy for it. If we are going to be talking, there's another side of that, what the will of the incumbent is.
As we take, are there other suggestions for? Are there comments?
Is to put up each of them, and we'll look for the majority. Woman Combs said option 6 would be the hybrid hat, but have your discussion.
And maybe we can. The public hearings we've had have high turnout, and they should wait better for that to wait until 2020. That none of the people and I think said it, that I'm going to say it right here. their letter to the council of Roseland, and I happen to agree with supporting at least part of option, allow area our newest residents be among the first to from their neighborhood. To the greatest degree, off the scale here. And Mr. Johnson's comments about who's going to be an incumbent in the race, just a fact of going to be picking, voting in the other 4 districts. I think that the if 15 of the income, and I invite.
I'm intrigued that with different groups of people, and that when I spoke, what is now, they were, in fact, did say they went over 2018. This was slightly different there. I am aware that we got a letter, so supported, interested in your technique. 7, a very low representation. President who line for representation. People who serve on boards and commissions, the folks in the annexed area haven't boards and commissions, and to get to I suggestion of that 7 instead of 1, or that was because they've had representation in our city. Forget
Mayor, that argument, and I don't, frankly, that represents that much, that we have ourselves to the entire city. We will all answer more districts, but at the end of the day, and I continue to believe that as we make our decisions, I would feel like I was strapped neighborhoods with a diminish their impact, and our is to increase. I don't know what, and I would want an advantage and ignored or they're lessened. All of the attention late, not the is proof that get a good consideration, at least from days. So I would be 2020 parental, but for their permanence of this decision, see how it worked out and change moving forward into. I would want them to move forward that part of the conversation. And just Rogers and help that way to run again the wild card. I'm the one. I do chance to term
process. So first I want to start with, once we get valuable to start this even before the fact by the comments from out in the community. The best option that allow us, or 18, a third said 20, updated polling now that we have down. My answer is yes. Drastic, and so one of those being 2020. Just because will be the new District 6, very unique, and I'm not sure I have a bit of that, but I have made themselves very excited. Distinct challenges of district, and I know water. We get the presentation. Those 2 districts represent, because hopefully in the next 2 years, versus also interest experience just from the west side here, going to what you should choose. In this case, it would be definitive or should that choice. So representation from folks outside of town. I don't think that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, respect for a seat at the table as soon as possible. The long-term implications lining up and being in 7 and 1 incumbents, and so if we're trying to attack districts 1.
Thank you. Massive poll, Latino community leaders are in helping to develop community members to be able to do that effectively. So that should be 20.
Groups who see that they can't beat at the ballot box. What we're trying to do is is giving better and the CVRA does not a better geographic representation. Being somebody who is saying to reward somebody by allowing them to even run against for elections who make a determination on whether a lawsuit, I think, is the right direction nonetheless, and can force the issue, but that should be up to the voters. So I 6, 2, and 4. I don't hear a compelling reason.
Some of these. Why don't we start with?
Thank you, Mayor. So, Sarah, and let me just which option you want. And option 1 was the 2020 is the incumbency. Option 4 and your discussion on
Councilmember Combs?
Guess I have a question after all at this point.
No, of your before Mr. Hurtado's third option of these.
Option 2.
Oliveras?
Option 1.
Option 1.
Option 1.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Option 5. So we've chosen option 1.
And let's, so option 1 would, so, and you each have 4, and you are voting to
4.
It would be 5.
Sawyer?
Choice.
Without a fourth.
2, 4, 6.
2, 4, 6.
Mayor Coursey?
So Mayor, you've selected your 3, 1, 3, 5, and 20.
When the map is posted later, with all the turnout numbers that we were with the map.
I'll introduce Santa Rosa. Is Mary? Okay.